right now is impeachment by prior inconsistent statement, because that one is the one that has the formula that is the most commonly used, okay? And it's one that you really need to know. If you know the formula for impeachment by prior inconsistent statement, then you are, if you memorize it, then you are set in the courtroom. It's just a nice little piece of theater that you can use. Okay, so the first thing, obviously, is when you attack credibility through inconsistent statements, you got to find some inconsistent statements. And this is where your preparation is very important, okay? You need to read every word in your file. Inconsistent statements do not necessarily highlight themselves as statements, okay? They can appear as data from a GPS. They can appear in a police report as a different date or time, okay? It's not necessarily so-and-so said X, Y, Z, but it can still be inconsistent. So when you look at your documents, you want to, and it's in the book if you've read the chapter, you want to prepare a witness statement chart for all of the statements any witness made, meaning, you know, you have to identify police reports, date, time, who said what to whom, and what the statement is that you want to highlight. You don't know it's going to be inconsistent yet, but you want to document every important or what you perceive as important statement before you even get to trial. You want to have a transcript key, so if there's any pretrial suppression hearings, if you have grand jury testimony, if there's a deposition, you want to highlight for yourself in the beginning of the transcript exactly where the important information is. And the way you would do that is you would have a chart, you'd have page, line, and then a comment meaning what the substance of the statement is. You don't always have to do the statement verbatim when you write down a witness transcript key. The whole point of it is that when you are listening at trial and you hear something that sounds different from what you read in either the deposition or the pretrial hearing, you can look at the index that you have, your key, find out quickly what page it's on, and then just make a notation that you want to go back to the page in that line. Okay. There are all kinds of places. So even, you know, not just interviews with law enforcement, emails, texts, you know, any other kinds of business records, a voicemail could be a statement that you might want to use. All right. Any verbal communication, if you have a witness who tells you, hey, you know, the defendant said this to me right after the incident. You know, suppose Johnny Jones said, Dan, it looked like something really serious happened back there, at Ocean Parkway. All right, that might be a statement that you could use later on. It doesn't have to be written down, is my point. It can be a statement to anybody at any relevant time. Okay. So you want to, when you're doing your preparation, you want to look for those statements first. This is the formula. Commit, credit, and confront in a nutshell. Okay, if you learn nothing else, learn the 3 C's: commit, credit, and confront. And we'll get into why no gloating later. Okay. Okay. So number 1, commit is very simple. Commit basically means that as you were listening on direct examination, you heard something that you think is inconsistent, and so you try to write it down as verbatim as possible in your notes. Then, when you are cross-examining when it comes time for the impeachment, you want to direct the witness to that testimony and say, you testified on direct that, and then use the exact words. That's all that commit is. It's like one question. It's one question that you bring the witness back to the point of his testimony or her testimony that you believe is inconsistent, okay? So the way it would go is, sir, you testified earlier that X, okay? You can, when I say you can back it up to bring in context, just be careful, okay? The thing about impeachment, the reason it's powerful is it's very surgical. It's supposed to be a clean cut. You know, you don't want to get confused, you don't want the jury to get confused. The whole point of it is to zero in, highlight, narrowly on the particular statement that you believe is inconsistent. You want the jury to know that, this is it. This is the statement, okay? You testified on direct that boom, boom. And sometimes when you get comfortable with your impeachment, you can, be Perry Mason, look at the jury. You testified on direct that the car was brown. Car, brown. Like you can play, but first you got to memorize the formula, okay? So that's commit. One question. Reiterate the testimony to be impeached and isolate the specific statement, okay? By the way, when you hear something, make sure that you do it as verbatim as possible in your notes, okay? So credit is the thing that people have the most difficulty with. You want the jury to believe and understand that the statement that the witness made at an earlier time, date, and place was made under circumstances where the witness would be telling the truth. Now, mind you, you're not saying that that statement is true and the current statement is false. The whole point of impeachment is you're showing that on two different times and places, the witness said two different things about the exact same subject, okay? But the reason you want to credit the circumstances under which the prior statement was made is because you want the jury to believe that in that situation, just like under oath here in court, the witness would not be inclined to lie. And then the witness cannot discount it as something that was a mistake or negligible or not important, okay? So we're gonna stop here for a second and we're gonna do a little practice on crediting, okay? So now, let's suppose that we are in the Jill Decker case. Let's suppose that Johnny Jones said on his direct testimony, okay? And I'm just going to read a Q&A that I made up, okay? Question, what time did you Question, what time did you arrive at the vicinity of Ocean Parkway and Ditmas Avenue? Answer, I arrived there at approximately 2:10 p.m. Question, did you see an ambulance or any police officers on Ocean Parkway and Ditmas Avenue when you arrived? Answer, no. Question, is that the first time you were on Ocean Parkway that day? Answer, I believe so, yes. Okay. Now, if you are the plaintiff's attorney, that I believe so, yes, that that's the first time you was on Ocean Parkway that day, you've done your work, you know that, in fact, according to Johnny Jones's work orders, I'm going to pull up here for a second. If you've done your work carefully, you would know that at 1:52 p.m. he was at 125 Ocean Parkway. Okay. So now the question on direct was that the first time you were on Ocean Parkway that day, and the answer was, I believe so, yes, okay? Now, first of all, how would you commit him to that testimony? What is the question you would ask if you wanted to commit Johnny Jones to that testimony? Justin?
So, Mr. Jones, I believe it was your testimony today.
Not I believe, okay, when you're on cross, you are a killer, okay? You don't believe, you tell him, you testified, okay? No equivocal language.
Johnny Jones, it was your testimony today that the first time you were at Ocean Parkway was at 2:07 p.m., correct?
Well, he said 2:10 p.m.
2:10
Okay, so
p.m.,
you would
correct.
use his words. Okay, yes, okay, so that would be committing it. Okay, now we're on the credit portion, okay? Now, how would you credit? What are the indicia of reliability of this report that you could use to credit him, to credit that this statement in his report was true? Yeah.
It was made allegedly the day of the incident.
Okay, so that's one factor, okay? That's a good credit factor is made the day of the incident, okay? What's another credit factor? Yeah, Mohammed.
Like the company policy as to how comprehensive the report.
Okay, so you would phrase that the company requires you, right, to write down when you arrive and leave a particular location, right? Okay, so your company directs you to do it, okay, so that would credit it. What else? What's another factor? Yeah.
Maybe his initials on the,
Okay, yeah, so you signed it. Where did you sign it? Did you sign this thing?
the bottom.
Let me see. Okay, well, yeah, he initialed it, J. It should be JJ. Okay. So he initialed it, okay, that's another thing that we credited. What else? Yeah, Mark.
Because you can show that all the different work orders, he's pretty diligent about filling in times precisely.
Okay, that's good. And it's a business record, right? This is going to be stored at the company. They rely on it, okay? So you would create a series of questions, and it's difficult to do when you've never done it before, but you would now create a series of questions directed to this report, okay? So let's try it. Who are my plaintiffs? Okay, Anke. I want you to just say a series of questions that you would ask Johnny Jones to credit that this report is something that he would rely on, and that is truthful.
I'm not really sure what you mean.
Okay. Do you want me to demonstrate? Is this something that does anybody feel like they can start it? Let's do it this way, Anke. So what questions do you think are important?
What the status, what comp means. I'm assuming it means complete, but I mean, I would ask him about that.
Well, let's start broader than that, okay? You're going to use this to impeach him that this is that 455 Ocean Parkway was not the first time he was on Ocean Parkway, right? So what's the first fact that shows that that was not the first time? What is it about this? What's the credit?
The address, it says 125 Ocean Park.
Right, but we're not there yet. What's the first fact about this piece of paper that would make it reliable or trustworthy? We just gave a bunch of reasons.
I guess the fact that it's a work order from.
Okay, so what about the fact that it's a work order? What's the fact?
You want to establish it like the other work orders?
Well, what is the fact about the work order? What's significant about the work order?
That it should be accurate as a work day.
Right, but who created it? He does, okay. So if you were going to ask a question to establish the fact that he created a work order for each job he did on May, what's the date again? 19th? On May 19th. Okay, and you want to create a question that would establish that he created a work order for every job he did on May 19th. What's the question?
Did you create a work order for
Not
every-
did you, you're on cross. But you're right. Go ahead, ask it in a cross-examination, lead your way. And shout it out, because we're recording this.
Are you required to create a work order?
No. You are telling him, okay? Tell him that he created a work order on May 19th.
So you created a work order on May 19th.
Okay, the so kind of dilutes it.
Okay, you created a work order on May 19th.
Shout it, come on.
You created a work order on May 19th.
You created a work order on May 19th for every job you did, didn't you? Boom, okay? Second effect that would make this reliable. And you criminal guys can, sorry, not the criminals. Yeah, Mark.
Okay, and those are your initials at the bottom?
Okay, but that's, let's tell him that those are his initials at the bottom.
And aren't those your initials at the bottom?
And those are, in fact, your initials. Don't ask him if they are. You initial the work order, right? Okay, what else? What other facts do we talk about that would credit this piece of paper? What's another fact that, yeah?
And you created these work orders on the day of the work order. did
Okay,
you not?
right. You created this on the day that you did the work, okay. What's another fact? You good fact. Another fact you good at.
Your company
Yes, that's,
requires you to create these work orders.
yes, just like that, but you wouldn't say it so hesitantly. You'd say, your company requires you to create these work orders, right? What's another question, Kara? Why does the company require them to create the work orders?
So that they have accurate records, that they're accurate.
Right, so make a question out of that. And the
your company-
reason-
And the reason your company required that you fill out these records is that they had accurate records of every, repair that you did that day.
Okay, what's another question?
I want to ask how long they keep the records for.
Well, so the more important part is, I think that he knows that the company relies on these records, right? Because the whole, what we're crediting is his statement in this work order, right? Whether the company keeps them for a year, 6 months, 5 years, 10 years, is less important than the fact that as he's filling them out, he understands and knows that this company requires him to do it. So ask him a question that shows his knowledge.
You're aware that your company requires you to make these reports.
Okay, so where is more wishy-washy? What's the harder word?
You know.
You know! You're working there, and if you want to, see, like, you can have real fun. You've been working there for how many years? You think you're a good driver? You testify how natural? You know these things. You know what you're supposed to do. Right? Okay. So that's how you credit, okay? That's how we credit someone, okay? Now, if it was something totally different, yeah. go
Just
on.
a question, so for that document, you said that you should never hand anything to the witness, so would you just be holding it up in front of him,
No, in
pointing
front of
at
the
it?
jury. You'd be holding it in front of the jury. He knows what a work order is. He doesn't need to see it.
But like if you say, those are your initials, what if he's like?
So,
"Yeah."
okay, so you're right. You would say you sign it, right? And you sign each one. There's a place on the form for your initials, and you know, if this is the jury here, there's a place on the form for your initials, isn't there? And you sign it, don't you? And you almost dare him to say, not always. Okay? And again, you don't have to argue with him. The jury knows what you're doing. Okay, so let's say, let's just use an example, it's not part of the, well, let's use one from Blanco. Let's use one from Blanco. How about one of the DD5s, the follow-up reports, okay? So, let's do a simple one. Okay, so let's say you're cross-examining, Andrew Kizzy is being directly examined by the prosecutor, okay? Question, you chased Mr. Polanco up Broadway with a group of your friends, right? Answer, I don't know who all was following him besides me and Jay-Z. Question, aren't you and your friends that chased Mr. Polanco in a gang called 425 Crew? Answer, no, I ain't never heard of any such thing. Okay, now, so if DD5 number 3 has him talking about the 425 Crew, what is it that you can do to credit? What are the things that would make it reliable and honest that he would have said the truth to the officer who filled out the DD5? What are some factors? Yeah, Justin.
Being in a gang is like self-incriminating, so he telling the police officer that.
Well, so we're not at the telling what he told the police officer. We want to show that this police officer's form, the police officer filling this out, why would he have told the truth to the police officer? What are some of the things that we credit? Remember, he's brought down to the precinct, right? What are some things, questions or some factors that you could point to that would make it likely he would tell the officer the truth, okay? So one of them is that it's an incriminating thing, but that's a little too close to giving him an out, you know? Yeah, Mark.
I feel like you'd never lie in front of a police officer, would you, or something like that?
Well, so you'd want to build up, not that you would never lie, again, that's too direct. It's too direct. Remember we talked about the end around on cross-examination, you don't want to hit it that way. But what's solemn about talking to a police officer?
But they're in a position of authority.
Right, so what points that out?
Right, so I'd want to ask questions about his record in school.
Well, no. Stick to the officer who interviewed him. What makes him, what are the indicia of authority that police officers have? What are the indicia of, yeah?
Well, they have a duty to be honest, and
More factual, physical. Forget the metaphysical, what their duty is.
they're wearing a uniform.
They wear a uniform,
Badge.
right? They got a badge, they got a gun. Where's the DD5 interview? Do you remember where's the DD5 interview? At the right, and okay, you actually went down to the police precinct, which is a big building. And what is in that big building? What's in that big building,
Jail
Vilma?
cells.
What?
Well, there are jail cells sometimes.
There are jail cells, there's lots of officers, right? You're building up the important, someone walks into a police precinct, it's a very imposing authoritarian building, and you're building up the idea that they wouldn't want to get in trouble further than they already are by lying. Now, that may not be true, but what you're looking to do is make it a solemn occasion. You're crediting the surroundings, because you can't, Mohammed, you can't say whether or not he's telling the truth to the officer or whether the officer is, got a duty to report the truth. That's too, people could differ on that. But what you can't differ on that, there's this big fucking building. Okay, what? I'm gonna edit that out of the recording. Do not report me. There's this big building with lots of rooms and lots of official people. They have interview rooms, right? And you're talking to an officer. What's that officer doing? Taylor, what's that officer doing in this case?
Interviewing
But what's the purpose of his interviewing?
to get information.
Yeah, he's investigating, right? So there's a person investigating. Who's the person that was hurt, Victoria?
Marcus Caldwell.
Which is
The complaint.
Andrew Kizzy's friend, right? So another thing that's credits the occasion is that he's going down to help his own friend, okay? So if you were going to come up with reasons why Andrew Kizzy would have been truthful with whether it was Detective Brockington or and Officer Charles or whoever, you would then take these facts and then you would ask them in questions, okay? So let's see you ask them in questions. So Taylor, why don't you start? Ask a question that would show how important and solemn this occasion was that would make Andrew Kizzy tell the truth. Take one fact.
So officers wear uniforms?
Okay, too vague because we want to talk about this officer and this individual, okay?
This officer was wearing a badge?
Okay. So you would probably say it a little bit more assertively. So you were taken down to the precinct by an officer wearing a badge. And it was a police officer who interviewed you, so that, and then you could do lots of things with that. What's another fact?
Police officers brought you to the precinct.
Right,
You
okay.
didn't go voluntarily.
Right, or you were taken to, whether he voluntarily went or not, again, that's a wishy-washy word. Remember we talked about cross? You don't want a wobble word. What's the undisputed fact about that? You went down to the police precinct with an officer, right? And you went inside the precinct with that officer. Okay, Victoria, what's another fact?
And you had an in-person interview with that officer
Right, you might want to add in an interrogation room.
in an interrogation room.
What else is,
And you were under arrest at that
well,
point?
that doesn't help you.
Okay.
We want to make this very, very important. So you've got, he went down with an officer, he went into the precinct if you wanted to, and again, this is when you get comfortable with the whole thing, you guys are not, ignorant. You can think, if you just, in your head, imagine a police precinct with lots of officers walking around, this is an official building, you're there because there's an investigation going on. It was your friend that was cut, and you're there being asked questions by an officer with a badge and a uniform and a gun, and he's asking you questions to help solve the crime, right? And what's the other thing with Andrew Kizzee? Since it's his friend, does he want to solve the crime? Yes, right? So you might ask him, and you wanted to help this officer. You wanted to tell him the absolute truth because it was helping your friend, right? So that would be the setup on that, okay? Suppose that you wanted to use a statement given to, by a woman to her girlfriend at the movies. What's imposing, or what would credit that? What facts could you come up with?
Can you repeat the movies there?
So,
Suppose there's a statement, the witness on the stand is a woman who told her sister or her girlfriend something different than she's testifying to now in court at the movies. What could you do to credit that?
how long they've known each other.
Okay, yes.
Whether they like each other, whether they communicate.
Okay, not whether, okay, so you went to the
You've known.
movies with so-and-so, right? You've known them for X amount of years, right? What else? What else is,
Trust each other?
what?
They trust each other?
Okay, you could,
You tell
whether
each
you'll
other
get
things.
whether you get a truthful answer on trust each other, I'm not sure, because they might, don't forget, they might anticipate what you're doing. What's a non
You tell each other things?
undisputed fact? Yeah, you tell each other things, right? You tell each other things. What about the movies? Anything about the movies that would make it more likely to tell the truth? What?
The fact that it's quiet and nobody else would have heard them.
Okay. I'm thinking more that, they have a relationship that, they're in the movie theater by themselves, and there's no reason to, there's no one else around to lie for, something like that. You would have to come up with, that's a little harder because that's so the other way. It's instead of a precinct, it's a movie, right? But you would try to, and you don't have to do a lot of questions, but you would try to come up with at least 2 or 3 factors that would indicate that there's a reason that the jury should credit that statement. Okay, so you've committed them to their direct testimony. You said on direct X. You've now referred them to a time and place where they were with somebody else, whether it was the police, whether they wrote something down on a work order, or whether they're in movies with their friend, and you've established the air of credibility that that particular location person, situation would give them such that that statement is just as likely to be true as what they said at trial, okay? The final step is now to confront them. And once again, remember, impeachment is a clean cut, okay? Once you get to the confront them, it's one question. And didn't you say on that form to the officer, to your friend at the movies, use the verbatim statement, as verbatim as you have it. If it's in the DD-5, you read it. Didn't you say that? Da 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 da. And you know, again, the court is theater. You know, put your finger under it so the jury knows you're reading from it. Okay? If you're using the work order from Mr. Johnny Jones. If you're using the work order from Mr. Johnny Jones, you would say, didn't you write that at 1:52 p.m. you began a job at 125 Ocean Parkway that ended at 2:04 p.m. You use the exact words, okay? Always, always, as much as, now with the movie thing, it's a little bit harder because it's the movies, but you will have, presumably, you should have talked to the friend and gotten as close a verbatim statement as you could. Didn't you tell Miss X or, you know, your sister or your best friend, whatever it is, okay? That's it, okay? If you get a yes answer that they agree, you're done. Don't gloat. You know what gloating means? Don't ask to hear it again. Because if you ask to hear it again, chances are the witness knows that there's something really wrong with what they said, and they've been, believe me, Johnny Jones, if he gets impeached with something like that, is going to be thinking in his head, oh, what did I do? What did I do? What can I say? What can I say? I say, oh, well, I was in a hurry. I actually didn't fill that one out right then. I filled it out afterwards. I was estimating. You know, actually that job, now that I think about it, came after the one at 455 Ocean Parkway. I mean, witnesses will do that if you give them the chance. Do not give them the chance. If you admit it, don't gloat. On to the next subject. Move on. Don't think that, you know, a lot of times young lawyers, they want to hear it again because they like scored. And it's the biggest, surest way to undo what you did, okay? Now, if the witness denies it, you have several choices, okay? If it's the girl with the movies, you can choose to call her to the stand. If it's the police officer with the DD-5, you can either introduce the document or you can bring the officer in, or the officer may already be testifying. If he's already testified, you can recall him. If it's the work order, you can introduce the work order into evidence, or ask for a stipulation from your adversary that in fact this work order was filled out this way, okay? So if the witness denies, you're done with the witness. You do not, once again, even if the witness denies it, you don't start to argue. That's the whole point of impeachment, is that it is clean, it is done, it is finished, okay? You just move on and you complete it later. The jury will remember, and they will remember when you bring in the document or the witness or the girl, whatever, they will remember what happened. Okay, so this is the most important thing you need to remember. This is not hearsay, because you're not saying that either one of the statements is true. It is not for the truth of the matter asserted in either statement, okay? All you're saying to a jury is this guy tells two different stories at two different times, or this woman tells two different stories at two different times. They are unreliable. That is the point of impeachment. And the beauty of impeachment is that it's a clear, unreliable statement. It's clear. They said this today, and they said this somewhere else. What are you gonna believe? Well, the only thing you can believe is that the witness is inconsistent. Now, suppose the statement is not an exact contradiction. So, for example, in the Polanco case, if Marcus Caldwell at trial says that Flavia looked familiar and he thinks she was a student and he doesn't know how often he saw her, that's not the same as saying he never saw her, right? So the fact that she's a student in his English class, it's not as clean as it could be, okay? Maybe she misses a lot of English classes, maybe he misses a lot of English classes. Okay, maybe they, other than that one time when he pushed you over the desk, they never talked. You don't know. So, if it's not a clean impeachment, do you use it? Mark, you're shaking your head yes.
I think if it's close enough, you can kind of turn it to your advantage.
So really, again, it always depends on your purpose, right? If your purpose is to show inconsistency, it is inconsistent to an extent. Suppose you don't have clean impeachment. Suppose it's a case filled with these kind of, fudged here and fudged there, okay? Then if you think that credibility is an important factor in your case, you want to use as many of them as you can, even little ones, okay? It doesn't have to be clean. The law is as long as it's somewhat inconsistent. As long as it's more likely than not. I don't know if you guys remember, but in the book I talked about one of my first trials, a police officer saying, when I asked, did the witness, didn't the defendant tell you he was borrowing this from somebody else, this motorcycle? And the cop said, in the hearing, it rings a bell, but I can't say. Okay. He didn't say, yes, he told me that. He said it rings a bell. But at trial, he said, no, he never said that. It rings a bell was inconsistent enough. It would lead someone to believe that the statement more likely happened than not. So, you don't always have clean impeachment, okay? Is it material if he says that he doesn't know how often he saw Flavia? Is that a material inconsistency? No, you're shaking your head no.
I don't think the frequency matters. I mean, if he admits that he's seen her at least once, I think that, and then he later says he doesn't know who she is, I think that's enough.
Okay, so you're saying it is material. Again, it really, a lot of this does depend on your case theory. A lot of it depends on what you're trying to show. And your case theory is the thing you should be steered by. So in some people's case theory, maybe you want them not to know each other so well. And if that's the case, then, it's not inconsistent. You like it. So you're not going to try and impeach with it. All right? But remember, it's not hearsay because it's not for the truth of the matter asserted. Okay, so that's really it. So we're going to try a few here. I'm going to leave the formula up there. Okay. Any questions before we try? Any questions?